What's up everybody and welcome back to the channel. In this video for the First Descendant today, we're looking at a build for Valby that is honestly probably the most efficient killing machine that I've seen yet for Void Intercept bosses, just due to its simplicity, essentially just hitting your first ability and then watching the enemies die in the water. Now, especially with the change most recently where Gluttony and Molten Fortress are farmable solo, it's a good idea to have a Descendant that can farm pretty much all of the solo Void Intercept bosses quite easily, and I think this is pretty much it. I think the only build that can do it easier than this one is probably something that just shows up and then the enemy dies. So it is pretty damn ridiculous. Now, I do also want to say how I came upon this is right before I fell asleep last night. I was fucking death scrolling like TikTok, and I saw someone doing this to Gluttony, and the video didn't have the build in. So I started looking this morning for the build, and lo and behold, there's actually quite a few content creators who have put out builds on this. I was trying to build it myself, but I just wasn't pulling off enough damage. It didn't look nearly saucy enough. The creator Sen Evades, I believe he's also credited by a lot of other people that have made videos on this, so it could be that he is the originator of it, and if so, congratulations. If not, obviously pass the love on. Fantastic job on the build. Guys, I will link to his channel on YouTube as well, so go and show the dude some love. I found the secret essentially in basically looking at his, that I was trying to make mine at least have some survivability, but this shit is the most glassiest of glass cannons that you will ever see. But it kind of like embraces the whole thing of like, kill the enemy before they can kill you, or before they even know that you're there. So the point is that you're just dropping as many of these pallets onto the battlefield beforehand, so that when the boss spawns, he's already standing in like a shitload of this water, which fucking stacks and deals a bunch of damage, and then essentially just dies out to it. And if you manage to get the boss to actually go into a stun or basically just fall in on itself, then you're just killing them even faster. So first things first, let's just go ahead and dive into the build. We'll look at the modules for the Descendant. Then of course we're also going to talk about the Reactor and the external components. But since this is a skill-based build, there's going to be a lot of, I would say, similarities here to things that you see standard in skill builds. Now, when we go over here, we will start out by essentially not using a Transcendent module at all. That means that you don't need ultimate Valby like I have here to make this build world. You can just do this with normal Valby if that's what you want to do. But the point is that we're not actually going to use any Transcendent mod. We're just going to be empowering our first ability, which is Bubble Bullet, essentially as much as possible, which is a non-attribute fusion ability. This is a non-crit build, because if we look at Valby's just base stats, you'll notice that her skill critical hit rate is 5% and her skill critical hit damage is 1.3 times. So this is build basically, because she's a prime candidate for just building a raw power, kind of like just embraces that. So when we start out, we're going to be looking at making Bubble Bullet as dangerous as possible, and we're going to approach it from several different vectors. Of course, we're going to try and actually just increase the damage, right? But we also want this to last longer, so we want the poison effect or the water effect to last on the ground as long as possible, so that we can have multiples of these lying on top of each other and essentially just draining the boss's HP. We also want to increase the range, because we do want certain bosses are more, I would say, stationary than others and kind of like don't fuck around too much, but certain bosses will run away from you or to your sides and so on. So you kind of want to take as much of the battlefield with this water shit as you can, and you do that of course with range, so that you can always make sure that the boss is somehow, sort of like standing in your shit. And then the other thing that you also want to do is you just potentially want to look at what you can do to make either it cheaper for you to, basically throw as many of these bullets out, but at the same time you also want to drop the cooldown way down. You can see by default that it is 10. Mine is slightly lower because I actually have cooldown reduction on my Reactor, but the point is you want to get this way down, because you want to get a few of these out already even before the boss puts his ass down on the floor, so that you have some fucking bubble bath waiting for the boss before he touches these toes down in the tub. So let's start off first things first by looking at cooldown and what can we do about the cooldown. So the easiest thing to do is just to slap in Nimble Fingers. Nimble Fingers is going to give us skill cooldown minus 25.6, and that is already going to drop us from 10 seconds to 6.7. So we're kind of like well on our way. Next, we can put in something called MP conversion. If I can type today, that would be just fantastic. This is going to give us even more. This is going to give us another 36.5% reduction. It is, however, also just going to tank our max MP a little bit by 15%. And we kind of have to bear that in mind and try to address this with external components and things like that, because we need as much mana as possible. This is not a cheap spell, if I can put it that way, or skill. So you kind of want to have as much mana as possible so that you can push as many of these out. Now we can see that our cooldown is 3.1 seconds, which is good, but we can do better. Now, another way that you can actually do this is to use the focus mods. So you have focus on non-attribute, this one over here. This gives us, if we slap it in here, this gives us some non-attribute skill power plus 77.2, but it also gives us skill cooldown of negative 6.1. So again, now we're dropping it all the way down to 2.5. Then we have another focus mod that we can use, which is focus on fusion. So it's over here. So once we put focus on fusion in, that's going to give us some fusion skill power modifier as well as some skill cooldown again of 6.1%. And that gets us right below 2 seconds, which is really, really comfortable. And it's not to say that this build won't work if you're sitting at 2.1 or 2.3 or something like that. But I think anywhere as close as you can get to 2 is kind of like clutch. All right, so at this point in time, we're super happy with the cooldown now, and we've managed to actually put some damage in as well, which is great. Bearing in mind, of course, that this is non-attribute infusion, so those are the two things that we should be looking at stacking to get as much, bang for our buck. Now, we also, I mentioned, want to have this effect last for as long as possible on the battlefield, right? So that the enemy has multiples of these pools lying on top of each other, and essentially they are melting in them. So one of the best ways to do that is a blue mod called Skill Extension. Skill Extension basically says skill duration plus 36.5%, and you can already see this effect, this duration is going up quite drastically now, which is quite nice. While we are making this last longer, we also need to increase the radius so that we have as much water down on the floor as possible. Like I said, some of these bosses like to fucking dance around, and we will not have any of that. So one of the ways that you can do that is with a mod called Skill Expansion. What Skill Expansion does is it increases your skill effect range by 92.3, and you can see like our radius basically increases quite drastically here from 3 meters to 5.8 meters, which is yummy. Then we can go even further with that and add in a mod called Amplification Control. Amplification Control is going to give us even more skill effect range, and it's going to give us a small amount of shield. And this is coincidentally the only survivability mod that we are actually putting in, if you could even really call that a survivability mod. So then after having that in, we can see that our radius is quite juicy now, sitting at 7.3 meters, which means that as we throw these water bubbles out, we are essentially covering large sort of like lines on the ground, and we are making sure that wherever the boss is running, he is, running into trouble. Now, last but not least, we have 3 mod slots left, all right? And we definitely want to use something called Dangerous Ambush. I mentioned before that what you really want to happen, and you'll see it in some of the videos that I've recorded of attacking these bosses, is the best possible scenario for you is that a boss actually becomes immobilized in front of you in the water, because at that point in time you will get this massive skill power increase from Dangerous Ambush, and also the boss is standing still at that point, so now you can just fucking run a whole bunch of these bubbles right through him or her or it, and basically deal a bunch of damage to them. Now, at this point in time, we have 2 slots left, and we're just going to go more raw damage. You guys thought we were putting in survivability? No, you damn fucking, that's not happening. So we've got 2 more amp mods that we can put in. We can put in Fusion Amplification over here. What this does is it gives us a big increase to our skill power modifier of 61.3, but it does, however, tank our critical hit rate, our skill critical hit rate. Which is fine because we're building non-crit, so that's okay. We can pair this with the non-attribute version of the amplification as well, which is this one down here, which also gives us a pretty big boost to non-attribute skill power of plus 65.4%, and also then tanks our skill critical hit damage, which once again we don't really care about. So this is it. This is the build right here. I was not joking when I said this thing is, you know, glass cannon as fuck. Every single one of these nodes in a way attributes to just, you know, pushing damage out more, whether it is just raw power or making it last longer or making it be bigger or making it be available more often. So all you're doing is, you're not even, imagine that you are playing a one key keyboard and you are just pressing your first ability until that shit does not have any more mana left to cast. Now, just to show you again, guys, super glass cannon, 2695 HP with a very low shield of 1.8 and not much defense to speak of. So the point is, you gotta kill or you will be killed. And especially some of the later you know, voided set bosses, including Infernal Walker, obviously deals a fuck ton of damage. So you gotta play well-ish. And I mean, if you know some of these bosses, they telegraph their moves and things like that. So there are ways for you to essentially, you know, make sure that you survive, but in some cases it might take a little bit of practice. In some cases you might survive, you know, surprise yourself and essentially kill the boss right off the rip. Certain bosses are easier than others. For instance, you know, Gluttony and them, surprisingly enough, is super easy. Like Dead Bride is really tough because she kind of like just fucks off, doesn't want anything to do with you. Any of the spider bosses can be fucking a bitch because they tend to kind of like walk away from you or walk diagonally skew back. And that, of course, is, you know, nightmare fuel for when you're trying to get the water under them. So I remember I was struggling a little bit with I mean, Infernal Walker was a tough one. I think it took me like something like 11 attempts or something like that to get that kill, the footage that you saw. And some of the other ones can also be like a little bit more difficult. Like I said, the spiders tend to be, you know, tougher than the rest. But the point is, as long as you have this weapons package, you should be good to go. Now, speaking of weapons package, a weapon that is perfectly suited for this and that you should absolutely think of running, it's not to say that this build can't work with, I don't know, Nazastras or something like that. I don't know. I don't think so, but I'm sure people are going to ask, what if I don't have Peacemaker? Because it seems to be a weapon that a lot of people don't have. You could try some other things. I only really, you know, went with Peacemaker because Peacemaker is perfectly suited for this, and you'll understand why just now. So when we pop open Peacemaker, its unique ability, right, says Surging Peace. When using a dimension or fusion skill, we're using fusion the whole time, right? It grants a unique ability, single reload for peace. Now, this is what it's supposed to do, is let you shoot out a bunch of these bullets like in quick succession and stuff. But that's not what we care about. We care about the sort of buff that we get from it. So we get some additional stacks. This is a trigger rate of 100%. So as long as you are throwing these bubbles out, the shit is triggering. It has a duration of 15 seconds. It can stack 5 times. And this stacks your non-attribute skill power through the fucking roof. And so this weapon is perfectly suited for this because this provides you the ramp that you need. So you throw out those first couple of bubbles. As soon as the boss spawns in them, you already have this buff active, and now those ticks are ticking for a huge amount of damage. So this works really, really well. The good news is you don't need to develop the weapon at all. I have no fucking mods in this bitch. It literally is just a stat stick, but that's it. That's all you need it for. So this essentially gives you that nice little boost that you need to, you know, sort of push your damage through the roof. Now, we pair this with a materialized mixture reactor because we want non-attribute and we want fusion, right? That's what we care about. Now, in terms of substats, what you're looking for here is you're definitely looking for additional damage to Colossus. I would say that that's essential because the main point here is you are having these dots from the water essentially ticking on the boss, and they all benefit from this additional damage to the Colossus. So I think that the build probably becomes a lot less sexy if you don't have this stat on. Skill cooldown, I think, is good because it gets me under 2 seconds on that first ability, but I think it could also work if you just have more raw damage in there. I looked through all my reactors, and this was the best one that I could find that had 2 gold stats from a materialized mixture perspective. I seem to not have a lot of really good non-attribute fucking reactors, so fuck my life. but this one works really well and is essentially what all the footage is recorded from. But I do think if you have additional damage to Colossus and, like, you know, additional fusion skill power, additional non-attribute skill power, that can absolutely probably still smoke. It might even be better. Then from oh yeah, and then of course the other thing is you'll notice that I have a 5 out of 5 reactor. This is where you notice the biggest increase of your damage. Is when you start out with this, most people have no issue with making a 2 out of 5 reactor because most people have those items lying around, and 2 out of 5 is already going to be decent-ish damage, but you're really going to see a nice big fat fucking jump up as you go 3, 4, and 5. All of the footage that you have seen has been recorded 5 out of 5, so that damage is comparable to essentially what this kind of reactor, you know, sort of buys you. And then from an external components perspective, we're using Slayer. Okay, now Slayer is kind of like a dual-edged sword for us here, because yes, it is giving us a skill power increase, which is phenomenal. That's what we want, but it is also making our skills cost more. So there is I would say, a slight problem here, and the point is that you this build is very MP intensive. You want to get as many of these balls out as possible because you can essentially burn through your stack and then don't have enough to, you know, seal the deal. The good news is, against all of these Void Intercept bosses, you have multiple lives. So what you can do is you can dump all of your MP down on the boss, and then because you're a fucking glass cannon, just have the boss smoke you, and then immediately you spawn with full fucking mana and everything, and you could possibly get in underneath an enrage or something like that, put more water down, and then the boss dies. This is essential for the Infernal Walker kill. I don't think it's possible to one life him with this particular setup. I fucking surely tried. After the successful footage that you saw me recording there, I tried to see if there were other ways in which I could, you know, kind of like just make it even hotter. I was looking for the fastest kill possible I could get, and I definitely think you have to cycle lives. If I remember correctly, the footage I recorded, I even cycled 2 lives, so I was on my final one. I did have some attempts where I did it on 2, but when I did it on 2, I spent a lot more time like evading the boss and waiting for the right time to go in. After he telegraphed like a big move or something like that, I went in and, you know, put all my water on his back. But that being said, I guess the point that I'm just trying to make is, if you do run out of MP, just have the boss kill you, come back with a full bar and blow them away. I do, however, think it's also super important that you have max MP and MP recovery in combat on your Slayer sensor. But I say this every time, I don't think that it makes any sense to have any other 2 roles on the Slayer set on this piece, because the point is you usually use Slayer sets for skill damage builds, and if you're playing a skill damage build, you want max MP and you want MP recovery in combat, because that's the main way in which you deal damage. That's going to be it for the build. In terms of like your inversion reinforcements, of course there are some things in here which can absolutely help us. Quantum domain is huge for us as well. This can actually spike up your damage quite a bit. If you're trying to use this to do mobbing and stuff like that, I guess arc boost can be cute as well. But yeah, I would say quantum domain is also a big one for us here, because this kind of like also just gives us a lot of you know, additional damage. But the good news is you can just develop the bottom row and then just get that by picking up any one of these 4, and then that one will activate, and then you're kind of like, you know, good to go. But that's it for the video. Thank you so much for watching. I had a whole bunch of other things planned today that I wanted to do, but I ended up just using this build to kill Void Intercept bosses the entire day and fucking giggle like a maniac every time I did it. So I enjoyed it quite a lot, and I hope you guys do as well. Let me know in the comments down below what you are busy with in the First Descendant right now. We're basically killing off the last couple of days of the year. This video goes live on, I believe, the 28th. So we are getting very, very dangerously close to 2025, and I hope you're getting ready for a great celebration on New Year's. But as always, thank you very much for the support. I appreciate it. It's been fantastic. Until next video, fucking cheers.